Great. Okay. Thank you, Miss Amy. And we are going to go right into meeting our first guest speaker. This is Leng Power, we're going to hear from. Her title is the Homelessness and Housing Manager from the Stanislaus County Community Services Agency. She will also speak about the point in time count and give us an overview of the current homelessness issues. When I asked her for her bio, this is typical of Ling. She is a very humble, very gracious person who won't share all the honors and things she has received. I happen to know a few of them, as does Amy and probably many of you. But Ling has been a resident of Stanislaus County for over 35 years. Throughout her professional career, Ling has focused in the areas of disability rights, child welfare, leadership development, mental health policy, and homeless and housing issues. She has served on various boards and commissions whose purpose is to align community around the vision of social justice through education and compassion. And I love what she said at the end, and I always see it on Facebook. Ling is inspired by her daughters, Emily and Dahlia. And so without further ado, we'd like to welcome Leng Power to our meeting. Go ahead, Ling.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the warm welcome and for the invitation. My name is Leng Power, and I've had the privilege for the past several years to work as a homeless and housing services manager with Stanislaus County's Community Services Agency. I'm glad to be here tonight to share at a very high level the information on the very complex crisis of homelessness that impacts all communities across our country, including our community of Stanislaus County. I would be remiss if I did not give accolades and acknowledge Richard Anderson, a dear friend and probably the catalyst into the work that I'm doing right now as we work together years ago on the Homeless in Modesto project. Yeah, before I got deeper into this work and truly understood kind of the magnitude of the complexities. So I'm so privileged to be presenting with Richard. So next, oh, I do have a presentation. So we'll go ahead and pull that up. Okay. So, like I said, the issue of homelessness is it can be overwhelming because where do you start? A lot of communities are in the same position that we're at, and I thought that perhaps this discussion can be broken into three kind of key areas that the group could be interested in. First is data, like what's happening in our community, who's experiencing homelessness, are we doing any better? And how are we responding? How are we using what we are collecting in terms of data and information to help us guide practices and set policy? And then planning. What firm plans do we have in place? Who are the decision makers? How can you be involved? And before I delve deeper into data, I want us to take a moment and think about, if you want to write it down or just think in your mind, what do you think the number of people experiencing homelessness in the United States, in California, and in Stanislaus County? What do you think those numbers are? I'll give us a moment. Okay, so if we have those numbers, we'll move on to the next slide and we'll see what who was close. Okay, so according to the point in time count conducted in 2020, this is data, the most recent data that the National Alliance to End Homelessness has collected from communities across this country. A little over 500,000 individuals reported homelessness, experiencing homelessness in 2020. Of that, 161,000 are in California. And then of that, about 2,000 or about 3,000 are here in Stanislaus County. So if you look at those numbers, I believe it's still true that California does have the largest population of homeless individuals. And that does impact communities all across the state. Just kind of curious if anyone has a comment about how close they were with those numbers. If not, that is totally okay. Well, we'll continue on with the next slide about the point in time count and looking closer at Stanislaus County. Okay, so this gives us a longitudinal look at the past 5 years. I don't want us to be alarmed at that last number, although it is significant. The point in time count is one night, one day that the community participates in a count of individuals experiencing unsheltered homeless and sheltered homelessness. So we know just from a system and a community and just a sense that these numbers are very low. Just driving up and down and around the community, perhaps, you know, we just think that there's a lot more people experiencing homelessness than what we're able to capture. But this is the best tool that we have, that communities have, that policymakers have to track this data. So in Stanislaus County, we can see a steady increase. Whether this is our ability to count better, whether it is a lot of individuals seeking shelter, and so our sheltered numbers are higher. It's hard to parcel out, but this is data is telling us that in 2021, we had roughly 3,000 people identified as experiencing homelessness. One point to make about the 2021 point in time count that is different count since this counts have started, is that we used our data only in our homeless management information system. Normally, volunteers go out into the community and do a hand count with surveys, but because of the pandemic, our community and a lot of communities had to ask HUD for an exception. And so all of our data in our homeless management information system, HMIS, that's what we submitted. So, and in fact, Stanislaus County was one of a few that HUD allowed to just submit the data for. So we didn't do a physical count because of the pandemic. And that is partially why those numbers are in stark contrast to the previous years. Next slide, please. Okay, and I included this picture because I again wanted to emphasize that based on the definition that HUD provides, there are 4 categories of homelessness. So when we talk about the complexity of the homeless issue, it's further exacerbated when we then look at the different categories, because sometimes funding is tied to the specific categories of individuals experiencing homelessness. So if someone's experiencing literal homelessness, then they would be eligible for certain programs. If someone's at risk of homelessness, then they could be ineligible because they're not experiencing literal homelessness. And then there's a category for special populations, such as those who are fleeing domestic or seeking safety. So that's important to consider because it's not a monolith of those experiencing housing insecurity. So sheltered and unsheltered is very is one way that we look at the population experiencing homelessness. And again, sheltered is if they're in transitional housing, an emergency shelter. I'm going to talk later about our family, year-round family shelter and our cold weather shelter. That's considered sheltered homeless. Unsheltered are the encampments, the living in your car, those that we see kind of in our alleyways. Those would be unsheltered and contributing to these numbers. Next slide, please. So as I said, the point in time count is one day. Usually it's the last week in January, where communities solicit volunteers to conduct a count. Historically, it's been done through surveys, paper surveys taken out into the community, and individuals answer those questions. That's the data that we capture, and then we report out to HUD, and then eventually to Congress. And the because of the pandemic, the past couple of years, well, last year and now this year, there's going to be some exceptions. So this year we did request an exception to allow for a point in time count later. So that's happening February. And this is hot off the press. Press releases haven't even been issued yet. So if you're interested in assisting in the point in time count, you do have an opportunity still. I did provide the URL, and the training dates are coming up in the early part of February. The count itself looks like it's going to be the latter part of February. February 24th, yes. And again, though, that this is the count that determines the numbers, and this is critical for communities because policymakers at the state level look at a community's point in time count for funding allocations. That's certainly been true of the most recent grant funding to understand the magnitude of homelessness in each community. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving on to the response to homelessness. Here in Stanislaus County, I wanted to highlight on the right side there, the organizations, the formal partners, and the informal partners that we have to help us with homelessness response. On the right there, we have the practices that guide us, and these are considered evidence-based best practices. So I know that prior to the meeting actually started, there was a conversation around potential solutions to homelessness, and those are all a part of addressing homelessness. But when we look at the service delivery models in communities that work, we look at some fundamentals. So coordinated entry is the way in which we assess vulnerability for individuals experiencing homelessness. So, for example, so the it's called the VSPIDAT, the Vulnerability Index Survey, and that is used to essentially assign an individual a score, and then the individuals are assessed into the coordinated entry system. And what that allows a community to do is have a fair way to allocate, to match people to housing and resources. So those with higher vulnerability are matched into housing according to their score. That's not to say if housing options come up that are for specific populations like veterans or families, then that the coordinated entry system is looked at for those matching opportunities. And this is important to know because oftentimes, again, the issue is very large, and it's hard to understand the approach to how people get housed. And communities all across the country need to adopt the coordinated entry system of placement. The next is rapid rehousing. And rapid rehousing is a set of strategies that ensures that homelessness is brief and non-recurring. That's the goal. So, well, the goal is that it's prevented, but should it occur, that it's brief and non-recurring. And the way that happens, it could be rental assistance, it could be quick connection to case management. Essentially, we know that when individuals experience homelessness for a long period of time, it's harder to exit. So again, rapid rehousing is the belief that a quick infusion of supportive services and shelter, could be transitional housing, interim housing, shelter, emergency shelter, that's going to be the best approach. The third item there, housing first framework, that's basically a person doesn't need to be sober, a person doesn't need to adhere to program rules in order to be offered housing. So it's recognition that a person's ability to address whatever issues challenges they may be facing, is going to be best addressed when they are housed. So communities in California, if they receive state funds, need to commit to a housing first framework. The fourth item there, crisis response, is exactly what it sounds like. So again, it's a connection to behavioral health services, substance use disorder services, mental health services. It's health, like physical health, if there's a chronic disabling condition. It's emergency shelter. So a community who has a robust and thorough crisis response system is going to be better equipped to meet the needs of those who are homeless in their community. And the last item there, increasing opportunities for employment and income. The homelessness system is, upon entry, we're looking at ways that people can exit. One, and that's certainly true of the families that experiencing homelessness, who are often connected to CalWORK's benefits. That's the temporary aid for needy families benefits. And so one way of exiting homelessness is to a connection to employment and an increase in income. I'm going to talk later about those strategies specific to the families that we serve through our shelters, but we know that that connection to those resources is going to be a way that they exit out of homelessness, in addition to securing permanent housing. Slide, please. So some of the initiatives in Stanislaus County, as I referenced earlier, is the Empire Cold Weather Family Shelter. This is 20 units in the community of Empire that we have operated. This is our 4th year in operation. It's 4 months out of the year during the winter. Usually we move families in mid-December and work within intensive case management, housing navigation. There's a lot of supportive services should they find housing. We cover rental assistance, supportive services, utilities, if they found a job and they need transportation assistance, anything. Again, it's this intensive wraparound to ensure that at the end of the 4 months, they're going to exit into permanent housing and not back into homelessness. And the Empire Cold Weather Shelter is a unique partnership with the Stanislaus Regional Housing Authority, and then our property management at the Stanislaus Corporation for Affordable Housing, STANCO, and then our community partners that offer the intensive case management at community shelter, community housing shelter services. And based on the success of this program, again, it's been in operation for 4 years, we have a 98% success rate of matching families into housing once they exit. We wanted to do something year round because we recognize that 4 months out of the year was good, but we can do better. So the year-round family shelter came online in 2019, actually November 2019. And it was the first kind of motel to housing conversion that the county had embarked on. And it's 21 units in South Modesto. Yeah, I believe South Modesto. And again, offering temporary shelter to vulnerable families that are connected to the CalWorks program. And at the year-round family shelter, the stay is roughly about 6 to 9 months, so that they can be rooted in a place, receive services, receive connection to employment, and have a potential to increase their income so that they can exit from that time into permanent housing. Kansas House is a project that was, again, a collaboration with tremendous community partners, the Housing Authority being among them, City of Modesto, and Stanislaus County. And that's over 100 units at the, gosh, I think it was the former Budget Inn on Kansas Avenue in Modesto that has served to be permanent housing for individuals. I saw an icon on my, okay, I'm good. And then that last item there, the low barrier emergency shelter. So when we looked at the need of the community along the continuum, so transitional housing, interim housing, shelter beds were also identified as lacking. So we didn't have enough shelter beds in the community to provide shelter for people on the streets, individuals who were at that time residing at MOES, the Modesto Outdoor Emergency Shelter. And when that project came to an end, the low barrier emergency shelter was able to provide beds to some of those individuals. So we call it low barrier because we had identified some of the reluctance to seek shelter at traditional shelters were that they couldn't bring their things, so possessions. They couldn't enter into shelter if they had a partner, and then pets. So we say possessions, partners, and pets were the ways that we removed and made it low barrier. So next slide, please. I just wanted to highlight again some of the other projects that we were able to bring online. This is within the last 2 to 3 years. So I want us to just think about, for one, the last 2 years, but also just the ability to think of solutions and to kind of meet the moment in the ways that could provide meaningful change to individuals and address the issue. It's not the complete, it's not going to address like the complete solution, but there are more that we can offer if you are experiencing homelessness. So again, the low barrier emergency shelter in the city of Patterson, we were able to support the Naomi's House, which is a women's shelter, and then Ho's House, which is the men's shelter, support the Salvation Army, an existing shelter partner, in increasing their capacity. First ever youth navigation center operated by the Center for Human Services, really conceived and led by the Center for Human Services. The city of Turlock did some renovation and repairs and acquired a storage facility for the clients at their shelter. And most recently, we've awarded funding to partners to bring online innovative and more permanent housing solutions. So a lot of this is driven by those in the homelessness response system identifying ways in which funding could assist them. And so when funding came available through state grants, the community was ready to take action on a lot of these projects. So I know participating in statewide discussions, some communities really had to start from scratch on identifying projects and spending funds. But that certainly was not the case here in Stanislaus County. So we're grateful for that. Next slide, please. So moving on to planning, what guides our work? What do we reference and how do we move forward? So in 2019, there was a plan to address homelessness that was developed. And that was developed specifically to satisfy a funding requirement, but it has provided us with opportunities to engage with diverse stakeholders, but also a way forward in terms of, again, planning and prioritizing for the funding that comes into our community. We source that so we can write for grant applications. We source that when we look at measurement of how we're doing. Did we accomplish what we say we will do, and how better off is the community. The 2021 regional strategic plan was updated with additional stakeholders, a more robust community input process. That has not been made public yet, but we did go out to the various communities, cities, jurisdictions, elected leaders, community groups to assist us with development of the strategic plan. So I believe that's in final draft. And I certainly can make anything available to the group that I've highlighted in this presentation. But next slide, please. Some of the goals that we identified in the most recent strategic plan, I've itemized here. We, through the robust community input process and the going out to the various stakeholders, it became clear that permanent housing options and the creation of more housing options, affordable housing options, was critical to addressing the issue of homelessness and just housing insecurity. Access to appropriate services. So we talk about a robust response system, and that includes identifying where gaps are if individuals come into the system and aren't connected, there's no warm handoff. That is something that we've identified that we need to strengthen and work to fill in those gaps. Achieving equity, you know, when we look at the decades of policy that were inadequate to address poverty and housing, we understand that there are inequities in demographics, in racial groups, and so achieving equity in solving and reaching to those out to those communities is also a goal. Increased coordination. Prior to the Homeless and Housing Division being stood up, that's a division that I'm a part of, a lot of good effort were being extended, but there wasn't adequate coordination of everything. There could be great ideas happening in one community and not shared with the other. And so part of the effort of increasing our coordination is really to ensure that we're all kind of rowing in the same direction. If that's an analogy that applies here, which, you know, I think as we move forward in homelessness, we certainly want to be. Increasing pathways to self-sufficiency. So again, it's ensuring that those who enter into the homelessness have a way out? Are we um, um, ensuring adequate case management so that they are connected to employment or disability benefits, or communities that would be a better fit for individuals, like if they identify family members in different communities, do we have a way of ensuring that their homelessness is prevented or diverted because they're connected to a network of support? And then increasing participation of people with lived experience. We understand that our untapped knowledge bank could be individuals, quite often are individuals who have been through the system, and could help inform our policies and our strategies on what is effective and what they found to be the most helpful. And then strategic support of best practices. So again, we participate in statewide discussions, national um, uh, conferences to learn what's happening in other communities. Homelessness is not specific to ours, and what are the most effective strategies to addressing um, the issue. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned on the slide before, identified housing, affordable and permanent housing are critical and has been prioritized by our community. Funding that comes into our community among all eligible use areas have been identified for permanent housing. And Stanislaus County has a continuum of housing that they'd like to produce for the community. And so Housing Stanislaus is an initiative led by our Chief Executive Office. And they invite participants, community groups, community members to be a part of that effort. And I can provide this is a snapshot of the website, but there's a link for you to be a part of that discussion. For those who are interested. And this is more on like the higher end of the housing continuum, not necessarily emergency shelter or interim housing. This is like the production of permanent housing and more affordable housing, workforce housing that is desperately needed in the communities. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, that's it. So, I had an opportunity to listen to Julia Orlando, and she was a executive director out of the community of in Florida, and she was the first ever to reach functional zero for veteran homelessness. And I was at a speaking engagement, and I was also speaking, and she was our keynote, and I ran into her in the bathroom, and I was kind of gushing over her talk and just her work. And she said, Ling, your community is great. You guys just have to believe that you can solve homelessness. And that stuck with me because she reached functional zero with homelessness, for veterans homelessness. And our numbers are big, but our vision to create solutions that make an impact is equally big. And right now, the state of California has an unprecedented commitment of resources to communities across the state to meet this moment. And I believe that with community partners such as yourself, community members who are heavily invested in solving this issue, we can do it. So thank you so much for the invitation tonight, and I'm open to any questions.
All right, Lang. So for the purpose of managing our question process, I'm going to pull things up from the chat. We have quite a few. I'm very excited. So the first we have is from Judy. I just heard about Chico's congregate sheltering, 177 pallets, single dwelling with air conditioning, heat, power. These small dwellings are built quickly. The strength to me is single dwellings. Do you know how that would work in Stanislaus County?
That's a great question. And that idea along is similar to like a tiny homes idea, but quick setup and can accommodate a lot of individuals. So my thought on that, and I believe a lot of communities have this as a part of their planning, is the sustainability. So it's acquisition of land, it's the construction of these items, but also if they are designed for those who have experienced homelessness or chronically homeless, oftentimes services are critical to individuals to ensure that their stay in those tiny units or pallet homes are successful. And oftentimes that is the point where communities are having to plan a little bit more deeply on the sustainability of those services.
Excellent. All right. Next, is a shortage of mental health services and providers an issue being addressed as part of the plan to solve homelessness?
Yeah, so the state budget, the final budget, I believe, did allocate a significant amount to our behavioral health system, specifically so that because there's a recognition that there's an intersection not only with homelessness and health, but homelessness and mental health, homelessness and substance use. So there is an investment in that, and how communities manage that at the local level is going to be, again, through what their data shows, and then again how they're prioritizing those solutions, whether it's permanent supportive housing or just a more robust case management, more connection into mental health, more specific mental health services. That's going to be a very local discussion.
Thank you. I skipped over a question and I had committed to doing these in the order in which they were received. So let me go back. Did you provide a copy of the 2019 plan to the reference department of the Stanislaus County Public Library? And will you do the same with the 2021 report?
That's a great question. They're public documents, so I don't see why not. And I linked everything in the presentation. I don't know if they showed up on Amy's end, but I'm happy to compile all my links and share it with the group, including the 2019. I don't think the 2021 is, like I said, it's not public yet, but once it is, I'm happy to share.
Thank you, Ling. Yeah, we definitely love those resources. So you and I can connect offline and gather that information in a way that's easy for me to share with the group and include it as part of the recording on our website. One more question from David. Do you have any idea about how many people are not technically homeless, but live in their vehicle, in a car or in a van?
So they would be considered, if they lack a dwelling that is fit for human habitation, then they would be considered homeless. So if an individual on the day of the point in time count goes out and encounters that individual, they would be counted as unsheltered homeless. And so I don't have that number for Stanislaus County, but they would be included in the homeless count. It wouldn't be a separate category.
Great. I want to be mindful of time and ensure that Richard has an opportunity to get to his portion of the presentation. So I would say you saw Lang's email. I know she's incredibly responsive. So if you have any additional questions that come up after the fact, please don't hesitate to reach out to her directly, or if you need assistance with that, Pat, I know, is more than happy to help you. So Lang, thank you on behalf of the League. With that, I'd like to turn things back to Pat to introduce the next portion of our program.
Thank you, Amy. And thank you, Ling. That was very informative. And as you said, hopeful. It's a plan, and we have to continue to look for the resources, and just like in education, best practices. And I totally loved what you said about coordinated efforts. I think that is one of the keys. We see it's if we are all on different paths, we might not get things accomplished, but if we can come together on some things, and I do believe that consistency will help, the coordination. So thank you so much. You are quite informed. And now I'm going to move on to introduce our other person. And I noticed on our list of participants, we have a few folks, Frank Pluff, who has been a part of this, who I know you know, Ling, and of course, Richard Anderson. I'm going to give you a little background on Richard because there is so much about Richard that I could share. But first of all, he has enjoyed 13 years of university classes and research leading to his PhD and 25 years of teaching biology and microbiology, mostly to prospective RNs at Columbia College and MJC. But then wanting to move out from the ivory tower academia, he has made a couple hundred videos, of which I am aware of some of them, and shorts about Modesto poets, political events, interfaith events, our homeless, and an hour-long documentary of our homeless history that ended in summer of 2018. That documentary was made possible by Ling, Frank Pluff, and Eric Kane. And I don't think Eric is on tonight, but Frank is. And so today, Richard is going to share an interview. And I looked at this and it's inspiring and it's hopeful. We'll share an interview of two homeless meth tweakers who were rescued through their own determination and help from so many others at the Modesto Outdoor Emergency Shelter, which Ling referenced to, the MOES. Remember that was set up and then taken down, but there was positives that came out of that. And so, Richard, I don't know if you want to say a few words before we jump into the video. I know
Yes.
you're here. So, Richard.
Well, thanks for inviting me. And Leng, thanks. And it's so good to see you. I do want to say before I start that we have two members of the NAACP Housing Committee, Sharon Froba, who's the chair lady, and Dave Froba, who is hiding there, I guess, who are attending. So, yeah, it's good to have a wider group of people coming in here. And before I start, I also want to say that I'm the videographer for these things, and I don't claim to have much real information about homelessness problems. I've sort of seen some, but yeah, the films are what speak. And I want to give Eric Kane and Frank Plouffe, who is attending here, and Leng and John Lucas credit for that movie. I hope some of you saw the Homeless in Modesto movie back in spring and summer of 2018. That's when it came out. And then that is all now history, because in fall of 2018, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals changed everything, how we could handle our homeless. And that's why we've made a lot more progress since then. Okay, so let's go ahead and see Chuck and Deanna. And I'll open this up.
So
And-
Richard, I'm going to need to show it from my computer because
Oh.
I don't have the ability to transition hosting responsibilities to you.
Oh,
I do
okay.
want to be clear. We're going to watch the entire film.
Are you asking me?
I am asking.
Well, that was my hope, but I know we're a little bit late.
We're a little short on time. So how about we play a portion of the film and we can certainly pass the link on to everyone like you had shared with me.
Oh, okay.
I just want to commit to honoring everyone's time schedule.
Okay.
All right.
Sure. So a little history for 1 minute.
Richard, do you have anything you want to add in before I start playing the video?
Oh, no, I've said it. And this has 1 minute of history and then the interview with Chuck and Deanna.
Okay, were folks able to hear the video when I had it on, or do I need to keep myself off of mute?
I'm sorry. Say that again.
I'm gonna look to Lang, who is my technological expert partner in crime. A piece of the video had been playing. Were you able to hear it in the background? Okay,
No.
now I have to stay off mute. Okay, here we go. Here we go.
2018, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decided that a homeless person cannot be ticketed for camping on public lands. The next day, tents went up in our own Grace Ada Park. The city quickly declared that camping tents would be allowed at Beardbrook Park, but campers would be forced out of other public spots. Beardbrook Park Village grew rapidly to over 400 people and was terminated when the city created MOSE, the Modesto Outdoor Emergency Shelter. Over 500 people were housed in these 10-foot square tent homes. Water, electricity, and services were available at the office that the city set up there. All residents at MOSE had to register, so their needs were known and were able to be served with the needed prescription drugs, counseling, and other help. Deanna and Chuck are a married couple who greatly benefited from living in MOSE.
Downtown streets.
Yes, that's got us to where we're at today.
So
That was besides Pastor Dean, Sergeant Hammond, and DST.
I know. How did all of them affect us? It's so neat how how we ended up where we are today because of those people. Do you know who Red Hawk is?
Yes,
yeah. I know.
Okay, Red Hawk.
He's
the one that we handed our last paraphernalia to and said, "Okay, we're going to quit." And he was like, "Okay, we'll see." And he was having meetings at MOSE,
and we would go. Yeah.
To his little Narcotics Anonymous meetings or whatever they were.
AA.
Were they AA?
AA, Narcotics Anonymous. They were both.
It was almost like therapy.
So what was the importance of MOSE to you guys?
The place to go, sleep.
Leave our stuff without having to hide it or put it somewhere every day. That's where our hope began, really.
Yeah. That was the bottom for us, and that was it. We couldn't go no lower.
Yeah.
The only way from there was up, and that's what we're doing. We're climbing up, and we got jobs, house. Well, we worked on DST with this lady named Dawn. She knew this person that had a landlord, so we moved to airport, Angle Lane. You familiar with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We moved to Angle Lane. And we lived in a trailer house there, you know what I mean? And we split the rents in thirds.
We had roommates.
They was clean. They got on drugs, and we just seen them go like this, fall apart, completely apart, marriage room and everything. And it was, and now, then we finally moved out, got our own place, me, my mom, and my wife, and then here we are now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you live in where now?
We live on the west side on Colorado.
Yes.
Wow.
And in a little 2-bedroom duplex. It's just the 3 of us.
And that's the way we like it, and our dogs.
So MOSE gave you some stability, a foundation, and a little more security, maybe?
Yes.
Yes, maybe. Yes. Yeah, I can't say maybe it did.
So you mentioned Dean Dodd.
Yes.
How did he influence you?
Church in the park. Yes, church.
Just the fact that they helped us, you know, like when you went to the shower shuttle, you got clean underwear and clean socks.
Yeah.
And you got a bit glimmer of hope every time you went there, and positive affirmations and, you know what I mean? Like it was just little tidbits of things that they instilled in our heads that got us to where we just finally changed our life.
One day I just said, she was journaling in her journal about it. I said, I want to quit. 2 weeks later, I said, I'm done. I can't do this.
And I was done. I was like, I just want my life back. I want my kids back. I want, you know, I have still young children. And
How many? 4?
8 or 7.
8.
Well, 8 including Kimmy.
Yeah.
I have 7 from just over the years.
How did Sergeant Hammond influence you?
You know, he was so nice to us.
kind, caring heart.
Yes.
Yes, he really does care about his people. He does, and that's hard to see. That's hard to find in a police officer. You know what I mean? But that's what he does. That's his compassion.
Yeah, there's not like a cold bone in that man's body.
Not at all.
He's he does his job and.
Yes, and he does it well. And yeah, he just by being kindness, and we make a point to see him every day that he was there.
Yep. We'd go out of our way just to
see him. Yes.
See him. Him, Red Hawk, just everybody in the staff, but the trailer at Moe's.
Christina Kinney.
Oh yeah, Christina Kinney.
Yeah, Christina Kinney. They're very good friends of ours. And
yeah.
Doug was there from day one with us on the journey from Moe's. Christina Kinney was there from day one, and she knows what we was like before we got sober.
Yeah.
Seeing everybody's insanity and knowing that I was acting like that made me want to change. That made,
Oh, yeah.
It was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for as long as we was there.
You said it gave you a little hope, but at the same time, you could see yourself in the other people, and you didn't want that.
And I didn't want that.
It's like a mirror.
And I think, yes. And I think that's what did it right there.
Yep.
Yeah. Seeing everybody fighting
Insanity.
over drugs, and there was so much of it there that you didn't need to fight over it.
Yeah.
Really, you didn't. I mean, honestly, you didn't.
Well, it was low barrier.
Yeah.
And I think that people wouldn't go there if they couldn't use, you know what I mean?
Right.
That's
just everybody knew that. That's city council.
Amy, let's end this.
There we go, Richard. Yeah, I'm going to turn it back over to you. We actually have a couple of questions, Richard, that I'd love to. Oh no, that was from you.
That's my question. Did you check the box? Did you check the box to make the video work right?
I thought I did, but it's a Thursday at the end of the week, Richard. I got to be honest. It's all I can do to make sure I got it going correctly.
Blame is not the issue here, but folks, if you look at the URL that she'll send, then you'll see that it's a good video. Oh my gosh. I mean, everything was wrong with the video and the audio out of sync, skipping.
But Richard, wait a minute. We listened to the power of the change that went on with these people. So don't negate that because we didn't have it linked to seeing them actually doing the talk. We heard what they had to say, and it was an amazing transition for them. And I'm so glad that you were able to capture that, and that Frank and Eric, and that what a team to capture some of these success stories, because I think that's what we need. We need more stories of success that to promote people to not give up, not only for them, but for the people around who care about this issue. So don't take away from what you've accomplished.
Well, I would like to say that shoulder that I was videoing over was Eric Kane. And I know a lot of you subscribe to his blog. It's very, very educational. And he's done so much work with getting to know individual homeless people, telling their stories and doing good photography of it. He's just, and then Frank, who may still be listening here. Yeah, Frank is a person who has dedicated the last 12 years of his life of retirement to helping homeless people in a very intimate way. And programs are, Eldridge Cleaver said something like this: programs are beautiful, but human contact is supreme. And so Frank does a lot of that.
Yes.
Okay. I hope
Thank you so much, Richard. Excellent. Thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments? Well, we hope that you found this. Okay. We hope you found this to be a very informative, ending with an inspiring story. And it is recorded, so people can go back and check things if you would like, or listen more. And the YouTube, we have it, it's in the chat, so you can go to it. Exactly. It is a very well done. And I just commend the efforts of this great team. And like I said, it is, we haven't resolved it, but is definitely coming up with solutions, and we are on our way, I believe, to continuing to work in this. So thank you. I hope you learned, and I hope you appreciate we have people out there doing this, the hard work and the point in time, if some of you want to join. And so I just say thank you. And thank you to Amy for being our always right there by my side. And so stay tuned for our next Meet and Learn, which we will try to get to you in the month of February. And so we thank you all for attending tonight.